American Heavyweight Championship on the line. Champion is Dan Kroffat. Challenger the Stamper. We pick up the action. It's all square from the ball apiece. And Kroffat has this place in an absolute uproar. Referee is Bob Frank, the winner of this match. On Sunday night, and this applies only to Calgary, on Sunday night, we'll face Harley Race for the world title. Stamper taking a little siesta. Stamper gave Kroffat an awesome pounding, won the first fall. Lately, Kroffat has come back strong. Got him with a sleeper just a few minutes ago, and it's all square at one fall apiece, and Dan Kroffat continues to hold a big advantage. You could say the Stomper's just hanging around. Huh? Boy, he's just hanging on right now. Kroffat. Kroffat is the man who defeated the Stomper for the North American title. But look out, this guy isn't through yet. One fall apiece. 1 hour time limit. Oh, a good right hand. This has been a great fight. Crowd is yelling, give him the sleeper. Beautiful. Beautifully timed drop kick. Uh-oh. Kroffat in difficulty now. Crowd chanting, go, Dan, go. Crowd going wild. Who's got that sleeper on him? Can he make it stick? He's pouring it on him. I wonder. He's got him down on that deck. He's squeezing him. It's very close. The referee hit Dan Kroffat. Referee hit Kroffat. What's going on here? Stomper pulled the referee over Kroffat. Kroffat hit him on the head. Now the Stomper gets up and goes to work with a boot. Well, what do you know? 1, 2, 3, and this crowd is irate. This crowd is really irate.
And away we go with another edition of the Stampede Wrestling Show.
Let me tell you good people something, and you beer belly sharecroppers out there.
Well, he takes me to the movies, we go strolling in the park, watch the late show on TV, he holds my hand in the dark, he's a ring-a-ding-dong dandy. He's a ring-a-ding-dong dandy.
Just a minute, what's going on
He
here?
always buys me fancy candy, he's a ring-a-ding-dong dandy, and he's mine.
We're going to have a little knock-it. Well, hi, everybody. As the old saying goes, batten down the hatches and lock the door. It is indeed wrestling time once more.
Hello, Stampede Wrestling fans, and welcome to the Ring-a-Ding-Dong Dandy podcast again. Today we're going to be having a true honor in Dan Kroffat joining the program. Dan Kroffat spent many years in Stampede Wrestling through the 1970s and early and mid-80s. Dan is going to provide some great stories today about some of his feuds in Stampede Wrestling, including those with Archie Stomper Goldie, also with Tor Kamada, and in particular he's going to talk about how he has created the ladder match for professional wrestling. Now, this is a match that started in Stampede Wrestling through the early 70s, was used in Stampede Wrestling through the late 70s and early 80s, and first was introduced to the WWF in the early 1990s. The audio you heard at the start of the podcast was the Stampede North American Championship being defended in 1973. Dan Kroffat was facing the Stomper Goldie, and Stomper Goldie pulled the referee into Dan Kroffat with their head striking, knocking Dan Kroffat down to the mat. At that time, Stomper loaded up his boot and then proceeded to kick Dan Kroffat in the head before covering him and winning the match and therefore the title. During the Stampede Wrestling reboot in 1985, Dan Kroffat made a comeback and he had signed an open contract to face any of J.R. Foley's men. Well, here is the result of that time.
Here we are. This is the special challenge match between Dan Kroffat and the Terminator Toots Jorgensen. J.R. Foley has arranged this challenge match against his boy, the bodyguard, the Terminator Toots Jorgensen, and the ever-popular, making a comeback, Dan Kroffat. Kroffat is outweighed considerably. Pull!
What is going on? Foley just decked Danny Kroffat.
He drove him on the back of the head with his helmet.
And now
Wayne Hart, the referee,
and
didn't see it.
Shaw. Mike Shaw.
Mike Shaw's in the ring. What?
Now Mike Shaw has a lot more experience than Jorgensen.
There is the man what signed the contract.
J.R. Foley.
Kroffat, not the Terminator. We tricked him.
J.R. Foley, you hit him in the back of the head with your helmet.
Wrestling Promotion 101 says that it's always important to put over your adversary. In this case, Dan Kroffat leads into the story by saying that he left himself open by signing an open contract, and J.R. Foley took advantage of it.
I have never seen anything like that in my entire life.
Well, I want to tell you, that was, I'm going to pay the devil his dues. That was a pretty wise piece of strategy, sort of a tactical maneuver on his part. I know exactly what he did. Last week I signed a contract, an open contract, and assumed that he would put his Terminator's name on it. I know what he did. He put the other guy's name, and that's fair. That's in war, and I don't mind it, but I got a message. No threats, no promises, just a message. Foley, when you go home at night and you go to bed and you slither under your rock, I suggest you leave a little bit of light so you can sleep with one eye open. Because if I find your rock, I'm going to come and sit on it and squash you like a bug. I want to borrow a couple of lines from Clint Eastwood movies. I want, first off, Foley, I want you to make my day for me. I want you to sign a contract here. Tonight we did it your way. You didn't win. But that isn't the kind of match I want to win, and that's not the way I want to win. And as far as that overgrown juvenile delinquent that he called into the ring is concerned, I'd like to borrow another line from a Clint Eastwood movie. If you feel lucky, punk, put your name on the contract. Come on back next Friday night, and we'll do it my way, and then I'm going to show you what war is all about. If you've seen the movie Commando, or if you've seen Rambo, then you've seen the tactics in those movies. I want to tell Foley he better keep both eyes open. He's going to see every kind of war tactic that anyone can use, I'm going to use in this ring. And that's all I got to say. Each week that I've come here, he's interfered in my match. And I want to say that I'm not going to make threats or promises. I'm not going to yell and scream because that's ludicrous. There's no way you get up here and scream and holler and make idle threats or promises you can't keep. but I'm sending out information, and I want them to hear it loud and clear. If they've got any guts at all, then come on here next week, and as I say, we'll do it right off the bell, and we'll do it my way, and I got a hunch it's going to be a total different match.
Well, Danny, to make a comeback, you at least won the match, but as you say, not the way you want to win.
No, that isn't really what this business is all about. I don't want to have my hand raised in that way. I want to beat his people one at a time, and I know he's got an army of them, and if I beat him decisively, 1, 2, 3 in the ring, that eliminates one down and another one to go, and that's what my chore is.
Dan, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Make sure you hit our sponsor, Manscaped. Use the code Dynasty20 and you will save on 20%, on your order plus free shipping. And while you're visiting Manscaped, make sure you check out the Performance Package 4.0. In this package, you'll find the Lawnmower 4.0, the Weed Whacker, Crop Preserver, Crop Reviver, Boxer Briefs, and a Shed Travel Bag. The travel bag is cool. I love the travel bag that I got from Manscaped. And you're going to love it all. The Lawnmower 4.0 is a great piece of machinery. It does the work. It gets you clean where you need to be. The Weed Whacker is great for keeping the nose and ears cleaned up and everything else. You're going to love all their products, the Crop Preserver, the Crop Reviver. They have all kinds of deodorants and powders and gels and what have you. Go check them out, manscaped.com. You're going to want to just buy it all. Just buy everything. But right now, get the Performance Package 4.0. That will get you started with the Lawnmower 4.0, the Weed Whacker, and a sampling of some other products, including that great travel bag. The travel bags, I'm telling you, everywhere I go, my toiletries are in this travel bag. You're going to love it. So go, manscaped.com, get the Performance Package 4.0, and make sure you use the promo code Dynasty20. DYNASTY20. You will save 20% and get free shipping. You're going to want to do it. Go now. Get the Performance Package 4.0. Use Dynasty20 to save some money, and then you can thank me on the backside. You're going to love it.
As Dan will talk about, he's all about storylines. And one of the storylines during late 1985 was a bounty placed on Dan Kroffat's head by J.R. Foley. J.R. Foley had numerous men in his army trying to take down Dan Kroffat at the time, all being unsuccessful. At this time, we're going to see about an old favorite of Stampede Wrestling, Gil Hayes, being brought in for a one-time match at the end of 1985, just around the time of Christmas.
Now, I was on assignment in St. Louis, and I missed you last week. I understand the bounty money is intact against you, but this is the last crack that Foley has. What's it up to?
It's very true. I believe he's got it up to $7,000, and I really feel good about tonight, because first off, my opponent being Gil Hayes, I remember Gil Hayes, and I know him well, and I really don't think he would be out to maim me. I think he'd be out to beat me, and I'd understand that. And if he beats me, he deserves to win. You know, really, Ed, this is the time of the year that we should all be thankful. It's Christmas time, and in being thankful, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank some people. You know, I received a phone call this week from a young fella from Victoria who phoned me long at his expense. His name is Stanley Campius. And on behalf of him, Wayne Willows, Jimmy Shalkowski, and I believe it was Larry Mutter, they all send me their regards and best at this time of the year, so I really appreciate that. The other thing I'd like to talk about tonight is, if I can get through tonight's match, what I really feel I've got a good chance to do, then this means moving into the tag team area. And the belts, of course, are carried by Star and Honky Tonk. And I've been watching a fella who come into the territory here recently who looks real good. You know who that is, of course. That young
Chris? Are you talking about Chris or who?
Actually, there's that young fellow that came from out of town. I've only watched him wrestle once, a dark-haired fellow. Really, really good wrestler. Looks tremendous.
Ron
Richie. Absolutely, that's right. Now, I watched him once. He looked really, really tremendous.
Yeah, he's good.
I think he's a fellow that the fans should get behind and really support, because he looks great to me. Him or Leo Burke would just fit fine into the scene of going after Star, going after Honky Tonk for those belts. I think we'd have a great chance to win them, and I'd really look forward to a match like that. I say, tonight, I hope we can get through this. If I can just survive tonight's match, a win or a tie gets me through the bounty thing, and it's behind me, and boy, I'll sure be glad to be done with it.
Okay.
I'll tell you.
Good luck
Thank
tonight.
you very much.
Dan Kroffat, always a pleasure to talk to him. Bad boy from Thunder Bay, Ontario. We haven't seen him in years. He's as obnoxious as ever at 230 pounds. Dan Kroffat, Vancouver and Calgary at 245. This is one fall with a 30-minute time limit, and we are at the 10-minute mark.
10 minutes, John. 10 minutes.
J.R. Foley has a lot of money on this one, Ed.
$7,000 worth of bounty, he says, to anybody who can get rid of Kroffat. He doesn't say beat him, he says get rid of him.
He's had a series of these bounty matches, and they've made an agreement this will be the last one. That Gil is quite a contact man, all con and no tact.
You got that right. You learned about him in a hurry, Jimbo. Off those ropes now. Good shoulder block down goes Kroffat. Over the top. Caught him in a headlock. I thought for a moment he was trying for the sleeper, which is so effective. Last week, he got rid of Ninja. The great. Off those ropes now. Something's got to give. Knocks his man down. He poleaxed him as he was going by, but I think Kroffat is shaken up too.
Got him around the neck area, Ed. I don't know, I haven't seen this Gil Hayes in action before, but I don't think I could warm up to him if we were cremated together.
Well, that's going to be it. They're both counted out.
No contest.
There was no contest, so therefore, J.R. Foley, you did not get rid of Dan Kroffat. He is standing here slopping tears, and he did not get rid of Kroffat. Gilbert Hayes is protesting. How do you feel, J.R.? No comment?
No comment.
Well, that's the smartest thing you've said in ages.
That's the first time I've heard that from him. J.R. Foley would cry over your wounds just so he could get some salt in them.
So, there you go. The referee is still explaining the situation. And Kroffat looks very groggy in mid-ring, but I am absolutely sure that that's what the referee says. It is no contest, and the referee is headed for the dressing room. Well, just a minute.
Ron Starr.
Ron Starr. He's got him down at the table. Honky Tonk Wayne. He slams him on that table. Interference by Wayne and Starr.
He slammed him down on the table.
They put Kroffat in a mid-ring and go after him, the two of them. He's not getting any help at all. The Boston Crab. They're going after his back. His back. I remember, 1975. Kroffat was out of action for 2 to 3 years because of a bad back.
And now Honky Tonk Wayne jumped up and down on the back, and when he slammed him on the table here at ringside, it looked like Kroffat was totally out of control.
This is ridiculous. They're both just hammering away at Kroffat, and nobody's coming to his aid at all. And
J.R. Foley, is this some of your work?
no comment. Well, they're both hammering away at him. I don't know why nobody's giving him a hand. They give him a double backbreaker. And now Chris comes in, but Benoit runs into a right hand. Butch Moffat comes in, and he gets rid of Benoit. Slams him on out of the place. Well, this is ridiculous. Mike Hammer's trying to get through to offer some aid, but Moffat is hammering away at him. Now Ron Ritchie comes in. Here's Ritchie. Ritchie's into that ring, and they clear out of there in a hurry. Ron Starr and Honky.
This is unbelievable. It could be the end of a career here.
Well, I think you guys are proud of yourself. You're proud of yourself?
Talk about a long-term storyline. In May, this is 5 to 6 months later, the bounty is still going on. And Dan Kroffat, at this time, is getting ready to leave from wrestling. So he's preparing in the next 2 months to have his final match with Honky Tonk Wayne, and then to leave and head into the business world. Well, bounty's still occurring at this time, and so Dan Kroffat is preparing to have further matches, and he's talking about how there's going to be some last matches coming up. He wanted to end this series, and he's heading into some ladder matches as well as a boxing match, and these are to be conducted with Honky Tonk Wayne, or Honky Tonk Man as he is better known. In order to get his final boxing match with Honky Tonk Wayne, Dan Kroffat actually hog ties Honky Tonk and places him down on the mat and forces him to sign one final contract. This will be a ladder match leading into the boxing match later in June, and finally there will be the Stampede wrap-up in July 1986, and that takes place at the Saddle Dome in a joint WWF and Stampede Wrestling card.
Well, here he is, all cocky and what?
Did you see what I get him, Mr. Whalen? All the people will be happy when they see this shirt and all those diamond rings. Good luck. You have climbed the ladder to success right to the top.
Man, John. Well, he said climb a ladder to success, and that was the key word. This is a winner right here.
Yeah,
I'm a winner wearing this shirt. You see the diamond rings? I'm going all the way to the top. I don't want to talk about Dan Kroffat. He's finished for good.
Oh, what was that? He threw something in his face. Pulls him down. Here's Kroffat. Comes off those ropes. Stops him on the head. Let me get out of here. He's got a lasso him. He's got him lassoed right here. Pulls him down. Bill Cody standing guard. He's hog-tying him. That's what he's doing. He's hog-tying him right in the middle of the ring. He's got him all wound up. Have you ever seen a sight like this, Jim?
He's hog-tying him. He's hog-tying him. I'll bet you he's going to line up a match right here. He's going to line up a match.
What a bet. I think that's a pretty good time for hog-tying.
32 seconds. Not bad for hog-tying the king of the Cowboys, eh? Come here, Ed.
Oh, you want to chat? You want to have a little chat, Honk? How are you? How's the weather down there? Oh, what is this? What is this?
What we have here is a signing under duress, you might say. This idea was given to me today by a Calgarian, a fan of wrestling, a fellow that works up at Calgary Motor Products. He said, why don't you go down there, hog tie him, he said, and get him to sign a match. So, here's what I got in mind. Come on down here. Honky Tonk, what I got here is a contract. On this contract it says, we are going into the corral next Friday night. The match is blacked out. It will not be on television. Also, this match will be the greatest match I will ever have. I will tell you what it's going to be. This match is going to be the ladder match.
The ladder match? Hey, Jimbo, I got to talk to you about the ladder match.
What on earth does that involve?
Well, there's a big ladder in the middle of the ring, and they'll hang a bag of money. What's the money you're hanging?
$3,500.
Oh,
it just happens to be the amount that he won when he came in and collected the bounty. But to ensure that he's going to stay in the ring, this week I contacted Stu Hart, and I said I want a guarantee against his wages for $3,500. Bill Cody's watching my back here. I've learned you got to have someone around all the time. So, the ladder match will have $3,500 hanging from a bag in the middle of the ring. And what he has to do, since it's his $3,500, he ain't going to be running. The way I figured it is, if we just signed a match, he could run. He could just leave the ring and go. But with his own $3,500 in the ring, he ain't going anywhere. Shut up!
All right, now a ladder match. There was some classic with Kroffat and Torquemada. There's a ladder in the middle of the ring. The money is hanging up there in a bag. You got to get to the top of the ladder, grab the money. How does that grab you?
And that's sweet, because it's Honky Tonk Wayne's $3,500. This Corral Mania could be a mad evening.
All right. Good cheer when he came in the ring. Ladder match tonight. J.R. Foley, his handcuffs should not be able to interfere.
Oh, but hold on. I'd like to see tonight be the final match of our series. I think it's time to end. I have a concern tonight with the money. If I should happen to win it, I hope that people don't stand.
$3,500.
It's going to be going to everyone here, and this would be a real pleasure to me to be able to share it. But you know something? I'd like to see this match as a springboard match. I'd like to have a shot at Bad News Ellen. You know, he holds the North American belt. I once held the North American belt. He's got great wrestling skills, that man. And you know something? He's never been able to exhibit those great skills here because he's been in the midst of brawls over the last 8 to 10 weeks.
Right.
So I think from a fan's point of view, and I know from mine and possibly his too, it would be an interesting match. We could exchange our wrestling skills, and I'd certainly like to see maybe the belt change hands. And I'm sure Honky Tonk's thinking the same thing. If he can get through tonight's match, he would like to go after Bad News Ellen for that belt. So maybe this may be a pivotal point in our careers that if one of us can get through the match tonight, we move on to Bad News Ellen for the belt.
Okay, Danny Kroffat, good to see you. Main and final event, a ladder match. Diamond Jim Davies, you explain.
This is probably the most bizarre match that you'll ever see, and of course, as we told you before, we won't be showing it all on television. But basically what it involves is $3,500. You'll see it 20 feet above the ring. Two men in the ring, Dan Kroffat, Honky Tonk Wayne. They have to get to that money. How do they get there? Simple. There's a huge ladder, a big step ladder outside the ring. First man who can get up that ladder, get that $3,500, takes it all home. Except Dan Kroffat has told us he'll be throwing it out to the crowd. You'll see it ringside here, standing on the apron of the ring, a very dejected J.R. Foley. Last week in the corral, J.R. Foley interfered. This week, he is handcuffed to the ring post.
Hip ties. Whoops. He missed. Well, it's kind of fun when the ladder gets into the middle of the ring and people start scrambling up and pull off the ladder. It gets to be quite an attraction. We remember, and some of the old-time viewers will remember, Tor Kamada, the pride of Japan, coined that phrase, no Chauncey, Mr. Wellen. He had a ladder match with Kroffat. Oh, what a shot there by Dan Kroffat. Looks like Kroffat is totally in control of things. He goes after Honky Tonk Wayne, who again isn't too anxious despite the money that's dangling within his reach. Well, the ladder match is over, Jim. You might explain what happened.
They both went up the ladder at the same time. They're fighting up there. The bag came apart. Right now, Dan Kroffat is throwing money out into the crowd. I saw a couple of hundreds go out there.
I saw a $100 bill. He says right there, and he's tossing it out of the crowd.
He's throwing that money. I got the money right here.
No, you just got part of the money. You got part of the money.
Are the cameras rolling?
The cameras are rolling. Get in here. Look at the money. Look at the money. I don't believe it.
That money's mine. Kroffat, you can't do that. You can't do it.
We've got Christmas in June. This is Christmas in June. That's what it is.
I don't know what he thinks he's doing, but I'll tell you one thing. It's not his money to be throwing. I got the money right here. I don't know how he came up with that.
He came up with part of the money. He came up with part of the money.
That satisfies me. I got a large portion of it. The crowd shared in it tonight. I fulfilled the promise, and I'm real happy. I guess that leads on to bigger and better things. Would have to be Bad News Ellen. I would love to go after the belt. I think the Angel's ahead of me, but boy, what does he want?
What do you want? What do you want?
Okay, Dan. I can see I'm not blind. I'm smart enough to know the bag's ripped open. I'm also smart enough to know that you threw half my money away. And I'm also smart enough to know, even though I'm bloody and banged up, but I still got more than half of it right here, Dan. And my point is this, big boy. I fought you on your terms. I signed a match on his terms, his ladder match. Now what I want, Dan, you want this money back, brother. I know you want to throw it to all these illiterate poor folks out here that ain't got a dime, but I don't care.
I'm the king of the fighting. I'm the king of everything, baby. I'm the king of the cowboys. I want to strap on the leather. I want to strap on the boxing gloves. I want you to go 10 rounds for the rest of this money, Dan Kroffat, and you stay back. 10 rounds of boxing? As you know, I don't know anything about boxing. I wouldn't profess to be skilled in that area. But the one thing that's attractive to me is the balance of that money. Tonight we threw a large portion to the crowd. I'll tell you what I'll do. Come here. I'll go a boxing match with you, and I got to believe that I'm the underdog in this. But there is one point. I'll go on it on the same condition as I did last week. I'll box you, but that money has to be held by Stu Hart, and in which case, then I will enter the ring with you, and if I win, the rest of it goes to the crowd. All right?
Well, now that we've set the stage, let's head to our podcast interview with Mr. Dan Kroffat, who currently lives in Cochrane, Alberta, and is known as a Stampede wrestling star. As he will talk about, though, he did have runs in California, also in Vancouver, and he made one tour through Japan at different times.
Hey guys, thank you for joining us and listening to the Dave Dynasty Show. Before we get started today, make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Dave Dynasty. You can also find us on Twitter at twitter.com/The Dave Dynasty, or if you're on there, just do @The Dave Dynasty. Of course, subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/The Dave Dynasty. Subscribe to the podcast on all podcast platforms. Just look up Dave Dynasty Show and you will find the feed for all of the Dynasty Wrestling Podcast Network episodes. If you'd like to contribute to the show, you can do that by going to PROWRESTLINGTEES.com/The Dave Dynasty and buying a shirt that helps us out. Or if you would just like to make a contribution, go to paypal.me/The Dave Dynasty. Anything helps. It all goes back into the show, keeps it free for you. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe and review and share. Now, let's get to the show.
So welcome back to the Ring-a-Ding-Dong Dandy podcast. We've got a fantastic guest with us today, Mr. Dan Kroffat from Cochrane, Alberta. How are you doing, Mr. Kroffat?
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on with us today. It's a great pleasure to have you aboard. I know you had a huge time in Stampede Wrestling, but your career actually started out on the West Coast, as I understand it. Can you tell us a little bit about how you actually got into the field of wrestling?
Yeah, you bet. Actually, my career started in Calgary in 1969. Stu Hart broke me in the dungeon, which is quite famous, as everyone knows. Many of the bigger names than myself, of course, started in the dungeon and went on to have tremendous careers. And I was very fortunate to be picked up by Mr. Hart, and he gave me an opportunity, and the rest of it was history.
Now, how were you scouted for that? How did you get introduced to Stu Hart?
Well, I was on the beaches of Vancouver on English Bay, which is a beautiful area in Vancouver, and a fellow by the name of Earl Maynard, who was Mr. Universe, and he was a pro wrestler at the time. He saw me, and we spoke for a bit, and he thought I had the look of someone who potentially could be a wrestler. And I said, at first, I never really give it much thought because I didn't think there was anything to it. And he really felt that I had an opportunity the way I looked. And so he made a phone call to Stu Hart for me and suggested that if I went out there to Calgary from Vancouver, Stu Hart would give me a look. So I thought, well, you know, what the heck? I've got nothing to lose. Why not give it a try? So through the recommendation of Earl Maynard, I went to Calgary in August of 1969, and I joined about 12 or 13 other fellas who were looking to break into the business in the dungeon. And it was about a 6-week period until the wrestling show would start again in the fall. So I was there with this other group trying out. And at the end of the 6 weeks, I was one of the few people. There were only 2 of us left of the group, and myself and one other fellow. And that's when my career started with Stu Hart in 1969.
That's amazing. Now, were you a wrestling fan before Earl Maynard found you on the beach?
Actually, my father was a big wrestling fan. Sitting on the island in Duncan, my dad used to watch it every Saturday. It was All-Star Wrestling out of Vancouver. And I would watch him watch it sometimes, and I even remember commenting,
sometimes I said to my father, boy, I'd sure like to give that a try. And he looked at me and kind of laughed and said, you wouldn't last 5 minutes. And he was probably right at the time. I was only like 16, 17 years old. But little did we realize that one day eventually it would become my career. And then I returned to Vancouver and wrestled on the island and around Vancouver and was part of the show there. And my father actually got a chance to see me wrestle. So that was kind of unique the way we came full circle.
Yeah, that must have been a great honor for your father to be able to see you doing that.
Yeah, it was exciting, actually. I remember wrestling Gene Kiniski for the Pacific Coast Championship on the island that we were in the main event. My dad was sitting at ringside, and you could see in his body motions and that he was pretty excited. So, it was really quite a time. I'm glad, he passed away in 1984. And I was glad I had the opportunity to perform and have him kind of enjoy it.
Oh, that's fantastic. A match with Gene Kiniski. How could you ask for something better?
Yeah, at that time, Gene Kiniski was the big name in Canada, and of course he was a Vancouver territory, and I had some good breaks in Vancouver. I had some great matches, and they used me in a pretty high-profile position, so it turned out really well. I had a great time there in Vancouver, enjoyed it very much, but I always found myself coming back to Calgary. Even when I went to the U.S. and worked in California or Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, all the different places, I was always returning to Calgary because it seemed to be the centerpiece to wrestling at that time, and it certainly served me well. And I had some great opportunities working with some of the best guys in the business and having the opportunity to work on top, which was really quite exciting.
Absolutely. Now, you were an athlete before getting into wrestling. You had a pretty good athletic background. What kind of sports were you into?
Well, baseball was one of my favorites when I was young. I had a chance picked up by a scout from the Pittsburgh Pirates. I was playing in Walla Walla, Washington, and I'd hit over 400 in a series when we were in Walla Walla, Washington. I hit 3 home runs out of the park, and it was a major league sized park that we played in, and there were scouts there, and so had an opportunity, but never did get to baseball, obviously. And then I was a swimmer, pretty active in that, and of course later I became a tennis player and played in the Southern California Championships in doubles, and a person and myself won the title. So athletics were sort of a part of my life, generally speaking, and I've always hoped to pursue that, and unfortunately wrestling became a part of it. It was a part of showmanship as well as athletic ability.
Absolutely. Now, rumor has it that you're one of the few that were never stretched in the dungeon. Is there truth in that?
Yes, that's funny you should bring that up because of our group. Actually, over the 6-week period, Stu Hart would whittle through guys, and each night there'd be a guy disappearing who didn't show up. And it was kind of strange to where the fact is that every night I'd find that we were 1 or 2 guys less. But the night before we were down in the gym, Stu would take a guy out onto the mat and show him parts of his body that he had never seen before. And I watched guys crawl out of the dungeon, and I seen guys run out of the dungeon. And I have to admit, I sat there in great fear because I used to think, my God, my turn is next. And for some reason, over that 6-week period, he never hurt me. We went through the fundamentals of the business, the wrestling and working the holds and what have you. But he just never hurt me. And I remember him on his deathbed. I visited him at the hospital a day or 2 before he passed. And I remember asking him the question, how come you never hurt me? And he just looked and kind of sort of smiled, didn't really let on too much. And the fact of the matter is that he never did tell me why. And it was always a mystery to me. But I was grateful because obviously if he would have stretched me, I by no means are a tough guy. I don't have the skill level that a lot of great, hard, tough wrestlers had. So it would have been easy for him to, stretch me. I would have been gone. But otherwise, as I say, he never did. So I'm very grateful for that.
That must be a sign of respect. I guess he didn't think he had to weed you out at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe, several people indicated that maybe he saw something in me, that the potential was there, because myself and the other person who survived the camp,
generally we didn't get stretched, and I saw a lot of great athletes get stretched, football players from the Calgary Stampeders and some real impressive looking young guys. But for some reason, I wish I could answer that. But as I say, I'm grateful that I was able to have a career because he didn't stretch me.
Absolutely. Now, I think it was around 1969 when your career began. Is that right?
Yes, it was September of '69, my first match in Calgary. It was with a wrestler named Dave Rule, and then I was put into a battle royal at the same night. So I worked twice that night, and then from there on in, I spent a whole year kind of just being, I guess the right word is a jobber. I didn't move up the ladder at all, and certainly wasn't making any money. I was almost starving to death. It was pretty difficult. My wife was working at the time, thank goodness. So we had an income and a small amount of money I was making as well. But I stuck in there and pursued it because I was hoping that eventually, I would get into the big time, if you will. But, it never really was great money, even when I worked on top. I was making an okay living, but certainly not getting rich like the fellas in the WWE had done, years later.
Mm-hmm. How was it wrestling with the so-called pig farmer, Dave Rule, one of the few guys that used farming as a gimmick for himself? How was that working with him when you were at your young career stages?
Well, I had my first match with him. He was pretty kind to me. Of course, he used a submission hold on me, which was fine. He never hurt me. But was he one of the classic wrestlers? I'd say no. He was the booker in the territory. He was, he worked for Stu. He's sort of the general, if you will, or the manager of everyone. So I think he had some privileges that allowed him to work on top. But was he a great worker? I would say no when I look back at the experience. But he was fine with me. It's just that he was in charge of things on the road, determining finishes and what have you. So I got to know him fairly well, and as I say, would he have made it in WWE? I would say no, but then I would add to that many of us may not have made it in WWE. That our size and other things are required in this day and age, and in the last 20 years or so, WWE has a different standard requirement that we had in our time.
Mm-hmm. So in those early days of Stampede, during the late 60s, early 70s, there were a lot of mainstays like the Christie brothers. I think George Gordienko was there. Did you have anyone that you would consider a mentor at that time, or would it be Stu Hart that would be considered as a mentor?
Yeah, without Stu Hart, I would have never had the opportunities, and I think life after wrestling as well, Stu Hart really kickstarted my career because wrestling was instrumental in my successes after even wrestling. So, I mean, that proved to be beneficial. But I would say a guy like George Gordienko, who is legitimately one of the toughest guys in the business, but also very humble, private. He certainly didn't push his weight around. He wasn't a bully by any means. He was just a really classy guy. The Christie brothers were great guys. They were very helpful to upstarts like myself. I rode with them a lot. I got to know them well. Very nice guys, very accommodating, very welcoming. There were a lot of guys in the business that were, great guys, especially a rookie like me. So, I'm grateful for met those particular people that made it easier for me to, rise up in the business.
Mm-hmm. I've seen a picture of you wrestling Sweet Daddy Siki. I think it's from Edmonton around 1970. How was Sweet Daddy in the ring?
Nice guy, very good to work with, real class act. Certainly, without question, he deserves the recognition that he's got. As I remember him well. I was very impressed with not only his persona, but his whole look. He might have been a guy who would have made it in WWE quite well. He wasn't overly gigantic by any means, but he certainly was a good worker and a nice guy, very safe to work with.
Mm-hmm. Then there were some times you went back and forth between BC and Alberta. I think you even made a trip to Japan. Did you wrestle under a mask in Japan for a while?
No, I wrestled in Los Angeles, as they gave me a name which I still to this day don't understand. It was called King Crow, and they put the belt on me when I went to Los Angeles. I had the United National Championship and I wrestled a guy named Seiji Sakaguchi, who was a lead out of Japan. They brought him in. It was televised live back to Japan via satellite. So my career really launched from Los Angeles. I worked with in battle royals with Bruno Sammartino and many of the bigger names, and they really put me over well. But I was a heel in LA, which I really didn't. I didn't enjoy being the heel. They decided they want me to be a heel, and I said, okay, certainly. But I preferred being a baby face. It just felt more natural to be a baby face. But they used me quite well in Los Angeles, and I went up to San Francisco. I worked for Roy Shires for a while up there. I did a Japanese tour as King Crow, and they booked me with Seiji Sakaguchi and other leads from Japan all the way around Japan. We did a really successful tour, and that was an exciting time. But I've never worn a mask at all. I just never was asked to either.
What was the gimmick behind King Crow? Did it have a particular reason for the character?
No, not to my knowledge. I had no idea why. Charlie Moto, the promoter, he just said, you're going to be King Crow. And I thought, okay, if that's what you want. We worked at the Olympic Auditorium on Figueroa. It was a nice stadium to work in, and the business was really booming at that time. And I guess they needed a heel, and so they brought me in as such. I thought I was going there as a babyface, but I didn't go in as such. So I worked the heel angle. I worked with John Tolis. I worked with all the big names down there at that time. And as I say, they put the belt on me, and from there it sort of escalated. And then the market got better for me, and I went to Japan, had a good tour. I never had interest in going back, though. They asked me if I'd like to do Japan again. I passed on it. I just said I don't think so, and that was kind of it.
So you weren't lured back to Japan. Was there something about Japan that you didn't particularly enjoy?
It's funny when I look back in hindsight. I mean, the money was great. The experience was great, but the tour every day and working with the Japanese was very demanding. It was a different kind of work than working catch as catch can. So it was fine, but for some reason, I just didn't have any feeling to want to do it. I felt more about, I liked working in North America, and I liked shooting angles. I was really into about promoting ideas. And probably that's where the ladder match came too, is when I, realized there were some opportunities to stay on top. I knew I had to come up with ideas. I was watching other guys, and I thought to myself, nobody's really telling stories. So I started developing these storylines and working with villains, and it really went over well. And the ladder match became one of the most successful matches, I'm told, that the WWE's ever used. So it was very advantageous for me to be here. Even when I went south to Louisiana and Arkansas and other places, it was always about angles, shooting storylines. So I felt more comfortable in the North American market.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were in California, there must have been some chances to be around luchadors. Were you ever around Mil Mascaras or other luchadors in that area?
Yeah, I worked with Mil Mascaras in Japan. He was my tag team partner in a couple of matches. And he was a headliner. He was one of the bigger names from the Mexican perspective. And he was a big name in Los Angeles. And I think he was one of the more sustainable long-term guys who were successful in the business,
Mm-hmm. So then back in the 70s, you were, of course, spending a lot of time in Calgary and Stampede. You had some notable feuds with Torquemada, Abdullah, Stomper. What kind of are the highlights of those feuds? What would you point out as the most important parts of what was going on in Stampede at that time?
I think chemistry would be the right word, is having the right chemistry with people that you work with. A lot of times guys would tell you they work with somebody, but they couldn't have a great match, or they didn't have the chemistry, they didn't have the personality blending. I was very fortunate. It seemed like every villain I worked with, whether it was Abdullah or Torquemada or Archie Goldie, and the list goes on, I just naturally had good chemistry with them. So it really meant a lot to me to be able to work with these guys and put forth ideas that they were receptive to. So I would say chemistry is the magical word for that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you brought up the ladder match, and some people will make statements that Bret Hart is the one that developed the ladder match, but of course that's not true. And I try to point out to them, no, it's you, it's Dan Kroffat. The first ladder match, I think, did not take place in Calgary, though. It took place on the circuit in Saskatchewan. Why was there this movement to not have it on television for the first match? Was it to try to experiment with it first?
No, that's incorrect, too.
Oh, is it?
We
Okay.
did the first match in television, was in Calgary, because I had worked the angle about money in the bag. And the first ones we did was about enticing Tor Kamata into the ring. And I put up money in a bag. And I had told Stu that over a period of weeks, we would eventually throw the money to the crowd. So television was instrumental in us performing the match and then throwing money to the crowd. And then eventually it ended up with hanging the belt up there. But the first match was in Calgary. Then we took it around the circuit.
Right. Now, Tor Kamata was a pretty big guy. Was he able to climb the ladder pretty successfully in those matches?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, it was like a 10-foot ladder, and we had worked angles. I showed him some high spots that we could do with the ladder, so it really didn't call for him going up the ladder a lot, maybe once or twice. But he was very agile. For the size that he carried the weight, he was extremely agile, very similar to Abdullah the Butcher, who was another guy that was very agile as well. So it was easy to work with them, really. It was more about the psychology of the match, how we kept going back, teetering back and forth, who would almost get to the money and who would almost get to the belt. So the psychology was to sort of dangle the suspense of it all. That was the storyline.
Absolutely. Now, Abdullah the Butcher and you had several matches, had a good feud. That was always a very bloody wrestling match when Abdullah was involved. Did you get cut by Abdullah at different times? Was that ever part of the match for your matches with Abdullah?
No, it's funny you bring that up because most guys that work with him would tell you that Abdullah either cut them or had them cut themselves. Never once did he cut me, nor did he suggest to, because I was always talking to Abdullah about return matches and how we could build storylines, and he was very receptive to that. And I pointed out to him I didn't see the need for blood from my perspective. If he wanted to bleed, that was fine, which he did a lot. His head was kind of like hamburger, and but I never cut for him, and he never cut me. So again, I was pleased about that.
One of the other things about Stampede is how much it transitioned through the 70s. It was the kind of land of the big men for a while through the mid-70s, and it became much faster, smaller territory over time. I think Curtis Iakea was there around that time as well. Did you have interactions with Curtis Iakea?
Oh, yeah. Great guy. Very personable guy. He was in the Army, John Foley's Army, and I had matches with those guys, all of them. Mark Lewin was there then. Excuse me. Yeah, he was a terrific guy. King Curtis Ikea, nice guy. I saw him in his later years in Hawaii. He was renting out surfboards or something in Honolulu and had a great visit with him. Nice fellow, and sad when I heard he passed away.
Mm-hmm. And Kasavubu, that would be another big man in Stampede around that time.
Yeah, I never worked with him. I don't know him. I know of him, but I never worked with him.
I never worked with him. Okay. Now, the big news around former Stampede wrestlers, of course, with Dynamite Kid and the recent Dark Side of the Ring. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to watch it, but of course, Dynamite as a performer was fantastic. Do you have any good memories of what Dynamite was like when he first came into the territory?
Yeah, he had one of his first matches with me. We went about 30 minutes. I may have dropped 6 pounds in weight. He was in such condition. He weighed about 170 pounds. He was the nicest kid in the dressing room, very cooperative, had a good match for them. I always had a really good relationship with him. We talked many times. I used to talk about financial management and thinking about his career. And then I didn't see him for a few years, and all of a sudden he weighed about 220. And him and the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith were teamed up, and they went on to be extremely successful. I remember my retirement match in 1985 in the Saddle Dome. We had about over 20,000 people, and it was myself against the Honky Tonk Man, and the British Bulldogs were against Beefcake, and I can't remember.
Greg
Barber,
Valentine, probably.
Yeah, Valentine. But I remember talking to him in the dressing room and wished him well, and he was very cordial and polite to me. I never had issues with him, as other people had said, and I'm certainly not saying those stories are not true, because each person has their own experience. But no, he was fine. He was always nice to me, and I enjoyed watching him. I thought he was one of the greats.
Did you see changes in his personality over time from when he came in as a young kid in the 70s to when he was more of a veteran in the 80s?
No, I never experienced that personally because I hadn't seen him for years. And when I did see him, he was very, very cordial. So I didn't see that. All I saw was a change in his physical makeup. He was dramatically different looking, he'd put on a lot of weight, I guess, through steroids and whatever other sources that he was using.
Mm-hmm. Were steroids something that was ever suggested for you at any point in your career?
Yeah, I'd heard of it, but I didn't have the courage to use them. I shied away from them. I remember seeing the Lyle Alzada story. He was an Oakland Raiders guy who did an interview, I think, with Barbara Walters, and I was saddened by the fact that he was going to die, and he knew he was. And, of course, later on he did die, but he talked about steroid use, and I just never felt there was a need for it. I felt like, I'd sort of had an acceptable physique. It wasn't unique. I wasn't, 6 feet. I was 230 at the time. It was adequate to work with all the heels, and physical presence wasn't a big thing in my time. And when I say physical presence, we didn't all look like, the Macho Man or other guys. There was very few guys in the business with dramatic physique. So we got by with that. The storylines and the type of wrestling we did at that time, it didn't call for it. But as the years went by from 85 on, guys were getting bigger and bigger and more physically present. So I would say during my period, there wasn't that great demand. But if I was to answer why I didn't touch steroids, is because I was afraid of them.
Hmm. And Dynamite, of course, was a great ribber. He always did a lot of ribs on the boys on the road, and I think Davey Boy kind of followed in his footsteps for periods of time. Did you ever see any really good ribs that Dynamite had played out?
No, I can't say that I did because, like I say, I knew him in the early stages, and then I lost touch with him. So what he did later on in the years only became stories, and I wasn't part and parcel to them, so I can't really add to them,
Mm-hmm. How about those trips through the winter months through Saskatchewan, Alberta, some long road rides? How did you pass the time on those trips?
Second guessing quite often. You'd say, what the hell am I doing here? We put on maybe 3,000 miles a week, and the weather was always adverse. I used to drive my own car quite often rather than ride in the bus. I liked the fact that if my matches was over early, I could get home sooner. I liked the safety of my own vehicle. So I didn't drive a lot in the bus, but there were 12 or 14 who were in that bus, and the mileage, everyone, no matter what territory I went, everybody would always mention, God, Alberta, the travel there is traumatic. And, everybody knew the reputation of driving to the matches here. It was pretty long hauls and sometimes quite treacherous based on weather. So there's a lot of stories there. You could talk to a lot of people about the incidents on the road,
Yeah, so many accidents along the way, so many wrestlers that were injured. Davey Boy, of course, had a major injury later on. Bruce was injured. So many injuries along the way. Did you ride in Stu's Cadillac at different points?
Yeah, quite a bit, actually. You would bring that up. On a Saturday, Stu would always go to Edmonton. That was the only trip he would make, and he always called upon me to drive the car. So I would drive Stu up to Edmonton. He'd fall asleep after about 10 minutes in the car. It was pretty traditional, and I would drive it. And he always had these old Cadillacs. He went through maybe 5 or 6 of them over the period that I knew him. And, we always make that Edmonton trip, about a 3-hour journey, and then I would drive home as well. So, yeah, Stu became synonymous with Cadillacs. He loved to buy the old ones. They were all limousines or what have you, and he loved his old cars. He really had a flair for antiques, and that his home was chandeliers, old Persian rugs, stuff like that. He was a rather unique man. A lot of people never got to know him from that dimensional side.
Mm-hmm. Now, Stampede came back to life in the 1985-1986 range, and you came back. You were a big role in that. You had a huge feud with Honky Tonk. What drew you back to the ring back in '85 when Stampede was making that reboot?
I'd moved back to Calgary, actually, from Victoria, and was nosing around, and Honky Tonk was on the card, and I'd watched it, had a couple conversations with Stu, and I said, you know what, my career is pretty well over, and I wanted to finish my career up, and I was going to turn 40, and I just didn't want to go any longer. I felt like some guys stayed too long. Their physical presence was deteriorating. Their skill level had deteriorated, and I felt like I might have one more go in me, and Honky Tonk fit the bill. He was more about storylines. I talked to him about angles, ladder match, haircut match, all that stuff. He liked it, went along with it. He was very accommodating. He was another guy I was very lucky to have a good chemistry with. And so I thought, you know what, this is a good way to end my career and start a new business. So my transition was from the business at 40 of wrestling into the new business that I had started that I would operate for the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had ladder matches. I think you even had some boxing matches with Honky Tonk, did you?
Yeah, I sure did. That was a lot of fun too. You know, I had an angle with boxing in that was, everybody loved it. It was, you know, we'd had this boxing match, and he came off as a boxer with great skill, and I talked about I'd never had gloves on before in my life. And we went out and did this match where, you know, he just kept dancing around me like Muhammad Ali, and I waited him out. After about 4 or 5 rounds, you know, he was pounding on me, but I kept protecting myself, rope-a-doping. And then finally he was dropping his hands. He got exhausted, and then I started wailing on him, and of course the crowd went crazy. And it was a very good match. It was a lot of fun because sometimes those gimmick matches don't go over well, but that one did.
And like you mentioned earlier, you finished up your career in the Saddle Dome in that huge card that was a combination Stampede and WWF card. You faced off against Honky Tonk. What was that experience like? Was that the biggest crowd that you'd performed in front of?
I've worked in front of bigger in Japan and in Los Angeles, in California. But what was nice, it was a nice way to wrap up a career where I had started. That was really significant for me. You know, starting in Calgary in 69 and then finishing in 85 in Calgary. You know, the people, the fans were very warm and responsive to my match, and I made an announcement at the end of it all that, you know, that was it. I was retiring, and I went out, I felt like with some degree of dignity, and didn't stay too long because, as I say, sometimes guys stay way too long and the skill level deteriorates, and I didn't want to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Now, a few years back, you got a big honor from the Cauliflower Alley Club. Can you tell us a little bit about what they honored you for and how that trip was there?
Yeah, that was very nice. They presented me with a trophy of recognition. It was in 2011. I'd been a couple times, and I got an opportunity to speak, and I talked on the subject matter of planning life after wrestling, to look for a career, how not to get trapped in limbo, you know, and talked about how people should have a transition from wrestling and reinvent themselves. So I had an opportunity to speak to a fairly large audience, and the award was nice. You know, I'd been invited back several times, but I've never gone after that. I think I went maybe 2 or 3 times, and you know, they're a nice organization, but I felt that after once or twice there, that was nice, and that was it. And but I think they're trying to do the right thing, is to, you know, recognize wrestlers of the past, and I'm not sure in what shape they're in today, how they're doing, the Cauliflower Club, but I'm assuming they're doing well. So, but it was a nice experience, as I say. I was quite honored.
They are still running. What I understand is last year, of course, it was canceled due to the pandemic. Was Honky Tonk there that same year in 2011 too?
Oh, God, I'm trying to think back. I think he was. I'm sorry, I don't remember everybody was there. I remember in one year, I think he was there. I saw Sam Steamboat one year there. Jake the Snake was there one year when I was there. But because I'd been there 2 or 3 times, I get a little muddled on who was there at what particular year.
Mm-hmm. So in your post-wrestling career, I know you've been busy with a lot of different businesses, but I also found that you had won an award from the Rotary Club of Cochrane. So that's your town you're living
Right.
in now. Tell us a little bit about that award. That must have been a great honor.
Yeah, it's the highest award that they recognize an individual for. It's community engagement and community builder. And I've done a lot of volunteer work here in Cochrane over the last number of years. And, you know, that's a part of retirement that's really been a pleasure, is that I found fulfillment and purpose when I left wrestling to work with community groups, whether Rotarians, Kiwanis, Lions, different organizations helping raise money, whether it's through golf tournaments or galas, dinners, or what have you. So, you know, this was quite an honor, and I was appreciative of the fact that I had been recognized, and I still today am working with groups helping raise money. I'm working with the mayor here in the town right now. We're doing a golf tournament this year to help build a senior center here in Cochrane. So, you know, I can't emphasize enough the importance to young people, no matter what walk of life they're in. If you're thinking about what you're going to do in retirement one day, community engagement is very fulfilling and very gratifying. So I highly recommend it.
That's fantastic. So in the past, I wondered about your relationships with other particular wrestlers, and if you're staying in touch with anybody nowadays. Is there anyone that you still talk about wrestling with?
No, to be honest with you, I don't. Les Thornton passed away some time ago, and he used to be a close friend. Archie Goldie was, but he's passed away. I'm confronted with the reality of losing a lot of the people in the industry. It's a generational thing, I believe, that we are slowly, I'm kind of one of the last men standing, if you will. You know, at 76 years old, a lot of the guys have gone way before me, and it's something you come to terms with. But I've sort of lost touch with the industry. Bret Hart and I still talk periodically. He did, they had him on Biography recently, and I was interviewed for that. I have a couple of cameo appearances, but very small. But he would be the only one that I really stay in touch with, I would suggest.
Mm-hmm. There was Tony Marino, who just passed away recently. Did you have any relationship with Tony Marino?
No, I remember of him, but I can't say that I could speak to a relationship, no.
Yeah. And then Ross Hart recently brought up an interview that he felt that Archie the Stomper was bipolar. That's the first I'd ever heard of that. Sometimes you have some pretty amazing bipolar entertainment people out there. Did you think that Archie had any kind of mental health condition like that?
I would have to say no. That's not my experience. My experience was that he was a very accommodating. I go back to the word chemistry again. We had great chemistry. We had some really, I would suggest, great matches, which would be attributed to his skill, not mine so much. You know, he was probably one of the best workers in the business, physically to look at, interview-wise, and believable work. So, no, I never had that, but I can't speak to other people's relationships with them. Maybe Ross saw something, or maybe there was an occasion where Archie did or said something that people found, different. But no, I have nothing but the highest regards for him, and I'm deeply saddened that he's gone.
Yeah, so am I. He had the best interviews in Stampede Wrestling. He was one of the people that legitimately scared me when I was a child.
Sure.
Now,
he scared everybody, actually.
Right. I heard he scared some of the Hearts, too. When he traveled to the United States, he often didn't speak. He never did interviews. Did he ever talk about why he never did that?
I don't know. No, we never did. We always talked about current things, what we were going to do, and we never talked about that at all. I never even talked about his personal life. It's just we had this dressing room relationship of what we were going to do in the ring, and I would put forth ideas, and he would be so receptive, and he would accommodate. So my experience is I can't say enough about him with regards to the business.
Yeah, he was a great star. In late '83, there was a series of events that occurred in Stampede Wrestling that kind of led to the downfall in 1984. They brought in a wrestler and they called him Stomper's son. They called him Jeff Goldie, and it led to a huge outbreak, and fans got involved. Bad News Allen got involved with some fans. It led to Stampede being moved out of the city borders for a while. Do you have any memories of what happened with that?
I wasn't here at the time. I was living on Vancouver Island, so I wouldn't be able to address that. No, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So, do you watch any of the product today? I mean, it's a dramatically different product than the times of territory wrestling. I'm not sure if you're interested in any wrestling now, but
To be honest with you, not really, and it's not because I hold any malice towards the industry. It's just I don't have the time for it, and it's kind of like watching a movie that you've seen several times. You tend not to watch it again, and so yeah, I don't follow the business at all, other than I hear of the odd name that I've known, and unfortunately, the only news I ever hear now much of is someone who's passed away that worked within my time frame. So, that's always distressing. I see Greg Oliver, featuring somebody who's passed, and I stop for a minute and reflect on our relationship, and then you pick yourself up and move forward. You just keep going. But, the business I really haven't followed that much now, I must be honest. And it's not because I disagree with what they're doing or anything about it. It's just that my time has passed, and the new industry is a new product, and if people are supporting it and liking it, then you know what? God bless them. And that's what it's all about.
yeah, it's changed a lot. So you've got a situation now where maybe in the past there were 12,000 wrestlers all over North America working full time, whereas now maybe it's, I don't know, 300. So it's a dramatically changed field. When I look at it, there's two things that I pick out that have really dramatically changed my opinion of what's happening. Number one, everything is so scripted, and so it's very hard to go off script. And number two, everyone looks like a cookie cutter. They're all the same. So when I think back of Stampede Wrestling, I see that there was a whole lot less scripting. People were open to do things, and people all look different. You had somebody like Tiger Tommaso, somebody like yourself, somebody like Abdullah, and everyone had a different characteristic to them. What do you think about that? Are these reasons why wrestling has changed over time?
Yeah, I think the word evolution is applicable here. Is if you look at anything, whether it be the movie industry or the technology of communication, evolution changes things. People change. So when you look at a product, look at a movie that's 30 years old, you might look at it and find it disinteresting because it seems like it's poorly written, poorly acted, and the storyline's pretty blasé. You look at a modern day movie and all the modern technologies of special effects and all the things that go into it. So when you look at Stampede Wrestling versus the wrestling of today, the transition of time, the evolution has brought it to where it is. Here's the real question. Where does wrestling go in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, you're hearing stories about the WWE possibly stopping touring and only being a television product. You wonder if that's going to open up the possibility of other more local promotions again, I suppose, or is it just going to be a continued decline in interest? I don't know.
Yeah, I think wrestling goes through the ebbs and flows. You look back into the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, I believe they had periods of transition there as well. Is that it was popular, certain individuals, whether, there were individuals who made the business what it was. They carried the product. And then when they went off the marketplace, for a while there could have been a lull in the business. So, I don't know. I'm not the genie in the jar. I don't have that visionary skill to suggest that this is where it's going to go in the future. I would just say it's more of an observation. It'll be interesting to see where it does go. I don't suspect I'll be around long enough to ever see the real transition of what happens to wrestling one day. But I'm sure generations to come will see probably a different product. But what that will be, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned how Stu Hart was pretty much your mentor. Did you ever have a mentee or somebody that you worked on trying to bring through wrestling?
Not really. There was a guy who took my name, but I didn't know him. And why he took my name, I was never sure. Certain people said to me, did you break him in, or was he related to you? And the case is no. I don't think I've ever had. There was a guy named Michel Martel who died quite young in the business. He was really a prince of a guy. He used to come to me for advice all the time, and I had the odd guy that talked to me about, financial management and, questions like that. But I can't really honestly say I was instrumental in helping any individual reach any higher points than they were at already. Would I like to have? Sure, of course. We all like to leave something, a legacy, if you will, but I don't think I've left a legacy in the business. The only thing I think I might be remembered for down the road when I'm gone is that the ladder match will be synonymous to my development that I brought it in, but will my name be mentioned? Probably very seldomly. So, I've never had great expectations about leaving my mark. You got the Hulk Hogans and the big names of the business that long after they're gone, they're like the Whipper Billy Watsons or the Gorgeous Georges. Long after they're gone, their name is still synonymous to the business. I won't be one of those people because I've never, ever thought of myself as a superstar or of anybody who really reached the peak of popularity or celebrity with wrestling like so many other guys have. I see myself as a guy who was cast at the right time with a product in the right community, being Calgary, that gave me the opportunity to do well during that period. But I've never for a minute fooled myself and thought I was some sort of a superstar. I don't think so. I just, again, think I was the right guy at the right place at the right time.
Well, you're very humble and you're very well spoken. Have you ever thought about putting together a book, a biography, talking about your career?
I've had a couple of people talk to me about the fact of writing my story, everything from being taken hostage and shot, and my career is, coming through the ranks and creating things. But to be honest with you, again, to support that position of being humble, I guess, I don't think my story is that interesting. So it would be hard for me to really believe that anybody would want to read my story. As I say, I think when you get older, you come to terms with who you really are and who you really aren't. And narcissistic personalities quite often come from who we think we are, but who we really aren't. And who we really are is the important piece. And I'm much more at peace at recognizing that I was very lucky to be at the right place at the right time, but I'm also aware of the fact that I wasn't as big a star as maybe I might have thought I was during that period. I look back and think, you know what, I was lucky. I had a lot of people help me along the way. And to answer your question, do I think there's a book in me? I don't think so. But my life's been rather interesting, and some of my stories, I guess, are, if at the very least, kind of curious. But no, I just, you know what, funny enough, if someone said to me, what would you like to be remembered for? I think the greatest thing that we can be remembered for, and this is something I wouldn't give myself credit for because I don't think I was, but to be the best parent possible or to be the best spouse possible, to me, is maybe the best thing we could ever be remembered for. And then next to that may not be our careers, but rather our contributions, the work in the communities we do, helping other people with other things. I would sort of take pride if I thought I was remembered years from now for my contribution in helping work in communities, making people's lives better. And then maybe wrestling might be a foremention to after all those things. So, you know, it's hard to explain to you, but I think when we get older, we learn to relinquish and replace, and relinquishing the things that we can't do anymore, and we replace them with realistic points of view.
I think everything in your answer shows why Stu had such good respect for you. So I want to thank you so much for all your time. You've been very generous, and it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Are there any other final thoughts that you want to add in?
Nothing. I don't know what your listening audience is, how big and who listens to this, but I would suggest that some of the greatest things that we can achieve is not always in the career we choose, but rather in the things we do for other people. And I really strongly recommend community engagement, helping others in a community, no matter where you live. There's always groups or individuals that you can help. the reward is really, it's not financial, it's emotional. I highly recommend to young wrestlers who are pursuing their dreams, pursue it. But if you find yourself not making headway in that, be prepared to transition to another career, because wrestling shouldn't be everything to a person their whole life, because the window is really quite small in that career. And as I say, I kind of wish I could turn the clock back 30 or 40 years. I can assure you there would have been things I've done different. And but of course, life is about learning. So I appreciate the opportunity of speaking to you, and I hope your listeners enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all your time spent in wrestling and for entertaining wrestling fans for so long.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great night and best of luck in Cochrane.